Hello, I'm Barry Daniel, and this is the podcast of the Middle Way Society. Our aim is to encourage a universal approach to living a more integrated, ethical life, avoiding dogma or any appeal to authority. My guest today is Monica Dare, who is a Pilates and Alexander Technique instructor. She trained in London with Body Control Pilates in 1998. From there she moved to Brighton, where she worked at one of the UK's leading studios for 18 months. She continued her studies in Kendal in the Lake District, where she completed a 3-year full-time training course qualifying in the Alexander Technique. However, she's going to talk to us today about her approach to teaching Pilates as an integrative practice. Hello Monica, welcome to the Middleweight Society podcast.
Hello, and thanks for asking me to come.
Okay, well, could you begin, Monica, by telling us a bit about your background and what was it that first drew you to Pilates and these sort of practices?
My background is actually in the body world, but not in an exercise body world. It was doing beauty and massage, and when I left school, I really wasn't quite sure what to do. I had thought I wanted to be a physiotherapist, so I'd always sort of got an interest in bodies. I was very keen on exercise, fitness. You know, at school, I was a real sports girl at school. And then I did my beauty training, and when I then opened up a salon, and I had 2 salons I was in the beauty world for 20 years, really. Right. But there was always a yearning to do more, and I used to go to the gym a lot, so I was what they would call a gym bunny. So I decided at one point, I thought it's time to start looking elsewhere. And a very, very dear friend of mine, who I'd been going to her classes, she used to teach fitness, and she got bowel cancer. She was one of my best friends. She died at 42. We were a threesome. There was another girl, and Pat took over Sue's classes. And Pat and I both had wanted to go into sort of body world work. And one day, amazingly, we both saw an advert in the paper. I lived in Manchester at the time, and it was Pilates. And Pilates at the time was quite exclusive to the dance world. They didn't train as mere mortals. You were a dancer, and it was often an apprenticeship. But we saw this advert, and it was the first workshop outside of London coming to Manchester. So Pat and I went along, and I had no idea what on earth they were talking about. And I lay on the floor doing these very small, quiet, precise exercises, small movements, and I just left there without a bead of sweat on me, and I thought, well, I don't know what that's about. However, Pat and I then went to London to one of the very, very few studios at the time in London, in Kensington, and I saw people moving beautifully on these wonderful pieces of equipment, and it was just flowing, mindful, easy, magnificent movements, and it was age group 30s to 70.
Right, so you're captivated. I
was captivated, and I just said, right, I want some of that. So that was the journey, really. Right. And then that's when I decided to I sold my business and did the career change when I was about, 42 or something.
Right. Any regrets?
I just adore it. I think it's forever interesting and beautiful. I love it.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, let's get started then. So what is Pilates?
Okay. Well, to many people, it's different things. Now, if somebody was to come along and look at a class, you would see some classes of 28, 30 people, or depending where you've trained, and you have a code of conduct, you would see classes of 12 to 14 people. Broadly, Pilates, in many cases now, it just looks like an exercise regime.
Yeah.
But to Joseph Pilates, he said it is a method. and it's a method of mind, body, spirit working in a very uniformed, precise, flowing way. And I feel that's got lost a little bit now in the world of Pilates that's just become so big.
Right.
But for me, Pilates is movement, but it's about awareness. It's about how you operate your body. In the movements, it's about concentration, and a lot of it is mind. It's the mind. Joseph Pilates said it's the mind that moves the body. And he also said it is not mind or body, but mind and body.
Yeah.
And spirit, actually.
Okay.
And I will throw this quote in because it's beautiful. And he said, if your spine is inflexible, i.e. stiff, at 30 years of age, you're old. If it is completely flexible at 60, you're young. So it's the spine, and it's how we look after ourselves. So it's sort of finding, Pilates to me is how you recruit the deeper layer of muscles, how you recruit the muscles that we call anti-gravity that stand us up. How would you recruit them? Because our habits, which is where the Alexander Technique comes in, distorts our alignment.
Okay. When you say recruit, could you define what you mean by recruit?
Recruit, the way I explain it when I have a new client, someone new to Pilates, I say we have two wetsuits and we have one on the surface, which is our surface muscles, our superficial muscles. Yeah. And these muscles move us around. So they get us up the mountains, they cycle me here today, and they move us. Now there's another wetsuit, deep inside, which attaches to all the bones and the joints. And that deep, deep group of often quite small muscles are the ones that support our spine. Mm-hmm. And Joseph always said, you move from the inside out.
Okay.
So if that deeper layer, that deep wetsuit isn't recruiting, and when I say that, I mean that every muscle has a firing up sequence. Mm-hmm. It's like a string of lights going on.
Yeah.
Now, if there's gaps in those lights, your circuit's not working properly, and your body isn't stable, and then you get this, like a client would say to me, you know, I just reached, I was just making the bed and my back went. Mm-hmm. Because you've done a gross movement without your deep inner wetsuit recruiting those tiny muscles correctly to support you before you move into gross movement. So you move from the inside with these deep muscles supporting your movement. Even before you've moved, they recruit. You can't obviously consciously recruit every single one of them, but some of the major ones, like the deep abdominal muscles, you can start to make sure that they're strong enough and they're recruiting correctly. So recruiting really is fire up the deep, then move.
Well, that's an interesting idea for me, because it actually happened to me a few weeks ago. I was literally just taking a cup out the top rung of a dishwasher, and then my back went.
Yeah.
And it was quite vulnerable for about 4 or 5 days.
Yes. You could have gone into spasm. So that's the clever body, you see.
Right.
Our bodies are amazing. So maybe your back went into spasm to say, watch out, because you're about to ping a disc or something.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it's doing to you. That's the warning.
Okay, well, you mentioned Joseph Pilates, who's the founder of the practice. Could you tell me how he, just give a bit of an overview, how he developed it and how it became such a popular practice around the world?
Well, Joseph was in that era with, he was born December the 9th, 1883.
All right.
And he died October the 9th, 1967. So
good old age.
Yeah, he did really well. He was born in Germany and he died in New York. But as a child, he was quite a sickly child. He had asthma and he had rheumatic fever at one point. And even as a child, he sort of decided that he was going to commit himself to getting stronger and being physically very fit. And that's what he did. And he did things like martial arts, He did gymnast. He was a gymnast boxer. He actually did circus training. So he had a very wide view and a lot of different disciplines that he worked with. And he, in the war, he was, funnily enough, a prisoner of war on the Isle of Man and in Lancaster, down the road from us. He ended up going to New York, and he met his wife on the boat going across to New York, and they were both like-minded. And then he set up a studio in New York, and he got a lot of dancers coming to him. And basically, he, from all his knowledge and disciplines, he developed his own way of working. And I think it was terribly clever because he could see the results, but I'm not sure he would have known how clever he was at getting these deep layers to recruit and what he was doing, I think, because they wouldn't have known about the recruiting deeper layer muscles and the timing sequence. That's all fairly new, really. But so he developed that, but it was still quite exclusive. And I think one of the leading lights in bringing it into the general public is a lady called Lynn Robinson, who is Body Control Pilates, with her husband Lee Robinson. And then there was one other lady called Helga Fisher, and the three of them really started to develop Body Control Pilates. And what Lynn did, she took it out to people like me and said, well, if you've done a bit of yoga, you've got a bit of body sense, a bit of anatomy, are you interested?
Okay.
And that's how it started to develop. Lynn took it out, and her husband took it out to the wider population, really. And then from there, Lee, her husband, is the marketing man, and without Lee, I'm not sure how big Pilates would have got. Lynn's magic, but you need the marketing, so it's a beautiful combination.
Okay.
And then it happens to all the different disciplines we've got, the yoga, the Pilates, the Tai Chi, the step, all the body conditioning. Different training schools pop up. And I think sometimes the training gets slightly diluted. And so for me, body control is one of the best trainings there is.
Well, what does Pilates do that other types of exercise don't?
Well, for me, the main thing with Pilates is that it's mind. You can do the exercise, but unless your mind is fully connected, like Joseph said, it's a mind, body, spirit connection. So you have to concentrate, and that's part of the principles of Pilates, is the concentration. And like Joseph said, it's the mind that moves the body. And you can do an exercise mindfully, or you can just do it and be thinking about your next cappuccino. So it's very, very much, if you want to do it with the precision and the flow and the concentration, it is very much a mind-body awareness. You have to be aware of what you're doing, your breathing. So it sort of flows into the principles, the main principles of Pilates. And one for me is very much, mobilising as well.
Okay, well, should we have a look at those? What are the 6 principles?
Okay. Well, the first one is concentration, which is what I was saying. You could do an hour's class. You see people, for instance, in the gym, they're on the cycling machine with a book. And I sort of want to go and tap on their shoulder and say, why are you doing that? Because you want to be focusing on, when you're there, have you got one shoulder hunched up? Are you leaning over too much? Are you pushing through one side too much? We all live in one side more than the other, so which side are you overworking? And if you're just reading a book, you're not focusing on what you're doing. Yeah. So that's the sort of concentration. The other one is relaxation, and some people say to me, oh, it's so relaxing. I'm thinking, I think that's not quite the right word, because I don't want it to be relaxing, but I want your mind to relax, and I want your habits of maybe hunching your shoulders up, tightening your neck, gripping your thighs to relax. So we need to relax the habitual tension that you have and the busy mind. And the only way you do that is to then go into the next one, which is the breathing, because the breathing, as in, I'm sure, any mindfulness work, yoga, tai chi, if you can focus on your breathing, then that in turn takes you into a journey through your body, and through that you can start to relax, focus your mind, and release the tension that is our habit. And our habit stops our deep layer internal muscles working.
Sure.
And then the next one would be your centering. And when we say centering, it's that awful word. I really dislike it. I'm going to use it anyway. Core. I don't like that word.
What would you prefer?
Well, I think Lynn calls it the powerhouse. Again, it's because the core starts at your big toe and finishes up round your eyebrows. Your core, these days, everyone thinks it's your tummy. It's not. It's whole body. So my core is my whole internal range of muscles. And my core is my mind. Because if my mind's not there, I haven't got my core firing up how I think it should be fired up, how we need it to be.
Sure.
So, or the other word is anti-gravity. It's the anti-gravity muscles, that keep us upright. As we are bipedal, it's much easier to be a dog on all fours. But we've only got 2 small feet to hold this whole amazing body up. So it's, we need anti-gravity muscles. And then coordination. And that's really about performing the exercises with control, really, and transition. So going from one movement to the other movement, but with a nice transition. So coordination takes mindfulness as well. Yeah. So coordination is beautiful when you see it happening. It's lovely. And then flowing movements is another one. And again, for me, the flowing movements is just what Joseph said, and it's moving from the inside out. If you want to grow your range, so some of the stronger exercises where you're loading your deep layer of muscles, but you're sending a leg in front of you and extended and an arm behind you and extended, you need to go deeper. And he would say you move from the inside out, but you go deeper into the inside in a very soft way to grow your range.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, which is leaning over a big load through the spine. If you lean over your bed and pick up something from your dishwasher, if you haven't got the depth, then that's when things start to go.
Yeah.
So that's the flowing movements, when you've got that inner strength, you'll see people move and they come back to you and they say, I don't know why I'm walking so much easier, but I am. Well, that's because you're waking up the inside.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's fabulous. And then the last one is stamina. But when we talk about stamina in Pilates, it's not the fact that you can cycle 20 miles. It's the stamina of the deeper layers.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the stamina to be able to maintain your mindfulness while you're moving, while you're exercising. And the stamina is the deep muscle endurance. Yeah, so it's not so much heart stamina. That's different.
Okay, and why do you do fewer repetitions in Pilates than in other forms of fitness training?
I am going to just say something here which wonderful Joseph said. He said that he refers to gym workout or any sort of aerobic-y type of workout. He calls it mindful repetitions. And we've called Pilates after Joseph, but what he called it was contrology, like contrology. Right. That's what he called it. And it's not a fatiguing system of dull, boring exercises. But, he says, it's always keeping your mind wholly concentrated on the purpose of the exercise.
Yeah.
So, it's the demands on the mind as opposed to on the body. And if you just, the body can keep, the body can just go on and on and on. It will just repeat until it's absolutely exhausted and it will stop. Is that the right exercise for your body, or is it just muscles firing up into your habitual use? And we're trying to change that in Pilates.
Okay. Now, I do Tai Chi, and from what you're saying, there definitely seems to be a lot of shared ground here. To what extent would you agree with that?
Well, I've done a little bit of Tai Chi, and what I adored about Tai Chi is the slow, meditative, breathing, thoughtfulness, feeling your body move, but in an effortless way.
Yeah.
And so my take on Tai is really the mindfulness.
Okay.
The control of your body, it's the most beautiful thing you can have.
Sure. So, like you've been using the word mindfulness, so you see these practices very much as meditative practices, in a sense.
I think it is.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm doing my workout, I can go into my world.
Yeah.
And you need to be in your world, really, which is like a meditation. When you're breathing in any yoga, Tai Chi and Pilates, when your breath is the flow that you follow with your movement, so you ride the breath with your movement, and your brain is riding the breath, it becomes a meditation.
And how important is it for you that we spend time getting in touch with our embodied nature?
I've thought a lot about this question because, this is just my total personal view.
Sure.
My view is, I just thought, well, for me, that's all we have, I think, our own mind, body, spirit. And if you're not prepared to get in touch with the only thing that you've got to make yourself, your life around you, to be able to appreciate nature, to love the world we've got, it starts, I think, from us. Nobody's going to do it for me.
I'm thinking about when I'm, for example, doing Tai Chi, and I'm sure you'll see similarities here. You've mentioned flow, for example, and balance. Like, if you don't have that awareness, you're constant. Because what you're trying to do, you're constantly trying to hold positions that are dynamic, but not too rigid,
yes,
and not too floppy. And also, you're constantly trying to be in balance. So the instructor might say at any point, okay, stop. And you're supposed to be able to not fall over. That, in that sort of almost visceral, embodied awareness constantly of stability, basically,
yes,
and balance and flow, I find that embodied sense can actually transfer into more cognitive ways of thinking.
Yes.
So if I'm more balanced in my body, I'm often more balanced in my outlook.
Yes,
Do
absolutely. And Alexander, he would say, it's about staying. His expression was staying in your back.
Okay.
Yeah, and being able to come from a sense of your own nervous system, and then come forward into the outside world. So at any time you're there and you're in a slight state of consciousness internally as well. And I think that word balance is everything, really, isn't it? Because it's a balance of the mind,
Yeah.
the body, the balance of the muscles, the balance of where you are in space, the balance of where you are, whether you're just up in your head, buzzing away in this outside busy world, or can you have the balance to be able to come straight back in when you need to. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is lovely to be able to do that. And it doesn't happen all the time because the outside world is our stimulus and it drags us out there.
Yeah. Okay. Right, you were just mentioning the Alexander technique. Now, your classes, the classes that you give, Monica, are a combination of Pilates and Alexander technique. Is this something you've personally developed, or what? And what's the rationale behind that?
When I was doing my Pilates training, the course director, who was called Helga, and she was from the dance world. And she invited me down to work with her in her studio in Brighton, hence the move to Brighton. And what I noticed as a real little beginner teacher was sometimes I didn't like the language, and because it comes, the dance world is quite matriarchal, and the words relax don't work. If you say to someone who's got the habit of holding their shoulders like this, and you just go relax, you've got to say how. You've got to give them a pathway towards their mentally being able to think what is, aware, how, what am I tightening up anyway? If they don't know that, they certainly can't relax it. And so Helga was excellent because she'd also taught Alexander Technique. And so I had a few conversations with her. And I came up to Kendal because I knew there was a school up in Kendal. And I was also missing the north because I'm a Mancunian, so I had to come back north. And they were running a week's taster in Alexander Technique. I don't really have much understanding of it at all. So I thought, well, I'll come up for a week's holiday and I'll do the course and I'll see how it goes. And what I really liked about the Alexander Technique was something I'd never had to do before, was listen in to Monica Dare. And I was fascinated by the skill of the practitioners on hands-on, on how they touched your body and how bodies responded to the touch with the right help, with the right words, with the right awareness. And I thought, right, that's the way I want to teach. And so new people may not even know I'm doing anything to do with Alexander Technique, but what I ask of people when they're in class is little questions like, so where are you now? How are you initiating this movement? Is it your habit to tighten your neck before you do anything else, or have you stopped breathing? So I throw little questions in, and then when I'm doing the class, or particularly one-to-ones, I do a lot of hands-on. So the hands are the feedback and maybe the start of a different journey for that body. So that's how it all gets integrated.
Right.
And how I teach, really. It's just years of coming almost from a different angle, I think, really.
That sounds fascinating. Now, Pilates is also famous for resistance training with equipment. Do you get a proper cardiovascular workout doing Pilates?
That's an interesting question. As you start Pilates, we will say to people, if someone comes to me for a one-to-one or a class, I do say, Pilates is not a cardiovascular workout, in that we define cardiovascular as getting your heart rate up for 20 minutes and being able to talk while you're, say, walking quickly, cycling. So no, on that level, it doesn't. But as you progress with Pilates, Joseph designed some absolutely wonderful equipment, and the resistance is springs. So it's a spring-loaded resistance machine, and he developed the main ones were the Pilates chair, the Cadillac, which is named after the famous Cadillac car in America because it's the creme de la creme, and the reformer. And when you start working against resistance, it teaches your internal wetsuit to fire up and respond quicker. So you get quite noticeably, fairly quickly, stronger. And so you can work a little bit deeper with the resistance. So the resistance makes you work from the inside out, but deeper and harder. And so therefore you can get your heart rate up. Working. You can, when you start going from floor work into intermediate floor work into advanced floor work, you will most definitely. But advanced floor work's really advanced. It's really advanced. So in many ways you can start to get a heart rate, but we don't say you get a cardiovascular workout, really, especially to beginners.
I've heard it said that Pilates reshapes the body. To what extent would you agree with that?
Well, I love that question because I think now in our world of sadly, a lot of obesity, and it was on the news today about what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat, and how fit you should be and what shape you should be. Size 0, average size in this country is 16. So what defines reshaping your body? If you define it by you're going to lose 3 stone, well, you may, but for me, the reshape is the alignment. How is your alignment reshaped? How are you moving? How do you hold yourself in a very organic way without any effort? And if you've stayed 16 stone, but you're moving better, you're stronger, then you've reshaped your body from the inside out. Okay. And that's what it's about, not so much the visual, but how are you moving, how are you feeling, how are you stronger, and have you got a better connection internally to yourself? Yes. That's reshaping.
So again, even though if you've got a lot of bulk, if you've got stability and flexibility and a sense of flow, then you not only will you be more connected with what's going on with your body, presumably, but then you'll be more stable. And
definitely more stable, because you've got the right connections through your body. And again, if you've got a flexible spine at 60, you're young.
Right, okay, yeah. This is a good tip for me, this, Monica. Okay, right. Are Pilates teachers medically qualified?
Yes, some of them are. Some of them have come. Some have. We have GPs, but we have a lot of physiotherapists.
Okay.
We have osteopaths, chiropractors. So yes, a lot are.
Okay.
Can come from that medical background.
And is there any scientific evidence to back up the health benefits that you've mentioned from Pilates?
I think I couldn't name any research as such, but there's an awful lot of research now in this country. Australians are ahead of their field in sports therapy, sports research, and they all use. You look at a lot of the Olympians now are doing Pilates. So the research really is coming from that angle, from like Loughborough University.
And could quite conceivably you go to the doctor, and could a GP recommend a course in Pilates?
Yeah, that is moving forward in a very wonderful way now. That there is back care, and they are using Pilates teachers, as opposed to costing the National Health Service a fortune. Yeah. They're saying, why don't we try this first? If you're unstable in your back, why don't we try Pilates, and let's see if we can stabilise you, and you can take responsibility for your own body, and see if that works first. So yes, we are getting now referrals from doctors.
And so presumably that more preventative perspective on your own health rather than curative. Obviously, curative medicine is helpful at times.
Absolutely.
But it would be nice to get a balance between the two, really, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah. I think if people just accept that you have control over your body if you want to, and you have a responsibility to yourself, really. And then if that, unfortunately, for example, if it's a prolapsed disc, well, sometimes medical intervention is magic and has to be done. Yeah. But if we could just take on more responsibility ourselves, let's try ourselves first, and then go into the medical if we need it. Absolutely. And it would take a lot of pressure off the health service.
Sure, yeah. Okay, what's your understanding of the middle way, Monica, and how might it relate to what we've been talking about today?
To me, I had a good look at this middle way, because I'd never heard of it, to be absolutely fair.
Well, we've only been going 2 years.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so when I started thinking about this, I went back to my father, who would have loved the middle way, I think. He would always listen to all sides of the story. He would listen round him, as opposed to obviously being too fixed. Yeah. Now, we all have our ideas, and we do have. But to me, that he was so, in a way, he was like, well, some of my brother and sisters call him a pacifist. And I know that the older I'm getting, the more like my father I'm getting. And so I read up on the middle way, and I thought, it's interesting about the ship and the rocks, and you're going through the middle, but it doesn't really matter where you're going. That's not it.
Yeah.
It's how you're going to get there, and
Yeah.
how do you influence yourself, your habits, because our thoughts are our habits, and so I see it as, I love the title because I think it is going down the middle, and it doesn't mean you don't have opinions. It just means I think you're open to suggestions. I think that's how I see it.
Sure, yeah. Well, so your dad basically was a person who tried to see the bigger picture.
Always, he really did.
Yeah.
He drove us mad. You know, as a kid, he drove me mad, and now I'm accused of that all the time, and I'm happy for it. I don't mind.
Brilliant.
I don't mind at all.
Okay, and then my last question: if people wanted to find out more about what you do and your work, etc., how would they go about it?
About what I do, it's
and maybe
Pilates,
Pilates in general
yes.
too. Yeah.
There's if you went on Body Control, the website www.bodycontrol, that would bring up the story of Lynn and Lee and how our Pilates developed. If you just Google Joseph Pilates, there's some wonderful stuff on the internet that you could use there.
Okay.
And I've got a website, and it's Pilates Studios -thelakes.co.uk, and that's sort of a little bit about me and what I do, and the use of the equipment. I have a small studio, and how I work.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you today, Monica, and a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been great. It's made me think, and it's made me realise how much I love my work. I love it.
Smash it.
Thank you.
You can find out more about Middle Way philosophy at www.middlewaysociety.org.